and welcome back to the ID Boxing Podcast with me, your host, Rob Tebber. As always, just like to remind everybody to please like, comment and subscribe. Turn your notifications on for more boxing content. Now that's out of the way, it's a packed weekend that we have to review, as well as looking forward to this weekend, the return of Anthony Joshua against Jermaine Franklin. But before then, I am joined by my able guests. I'm going to come to the one who's nicest to me. So Andy Clark first, and Barry Jones. The less said about him, the better. How are we, chaps? Packed weekend of boxing.
Good, yeah, really good, thanks.
It was brilliant, actually, to be fair. Not all of it, but most of it.
Yeah, it had its ups and downs. It was quite a few downs, actually. But I'm sure we'll take our time and come on to all of them before the end of today's show. Barry, where were you this past weekend? Where were you working?
Weren't I?
You did Friday night?
I just followed George Groves around pretty much. Speaking of George Groves, that's a nice hoodie you got on.
Big up the George Groves Boxing Club podcast.
Fine podcast.
Fine podcast, available on all your podcast outlets every Wednesday.
Allegedly, I haven't really listened to it. So.
You're too busy, aren't you? You've got this. You could do toe to toe as well. Do you have any other pods?
Toe nominated.
Yeah.
Award nominated toe to toe. Apparently, I don't know.
Yeah, Andy Scott was. Yeah, it was all he would talk about last week.
Yeah, it was very self-deprecating on the broadcast. Well, if you want to listen to an average bog standard,
two very mediocre hosts. I just saw what you're talking about.
Yeah, but see, that's just how it is. No, I don't want to take credit for it totally because there's other people involved. I don't know their names, but other people involved. But yeah. So I was in Bolton on Friday for the Channel 5 gig, and then over to Manchester then with the radio. BBC.
We were sitting mere feet apart. Barry was.
Yeah, he's in front of me, doing his big, Andy Big Bollocks. Yeah.
I was channeling my inner Barry Jones at times during the Okolie fight. I was talking about Vladimir Klitschko. I was talking about turning from the waist.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It is, isn't it?
Boxing a big man fight. I was.
Nicked all my stuff.
I could feel your presence.
Oh, sorry about that. My bullshit's rubbed off.
No, it was exactly.
It's all he needs to do, isn't it?
It's all he needs to do, yeah. It's all he needs to do.
It is indeed. But before we get on to what Lawrence Okolie needs to do, let's start on Friday night. You mentioned there in Bolton, Lyndon Arthur against Boris Crighton, of course, which was a late replacement. It was due to be Lyndon Arthur versus the well-known Brian Suarez. I know you were really looking forward to that one, Barry.
I was actually.
But we ended up with Lyndon Arthur versus Boris Crighton. Never an easy task, I'd imagine, to box somebody as a late replacement.
No, it's not. But it's hard for the guy who's come in at late replacement, to be honest. But we were trying to sell this whole Cinderella Man thing, like Steve Robinson thought there was no this to win a world title and stuff like that. And this was turned just to be a 10 rounder in the end. It wasn't for the IBO strap, let's just call it that. And but he was great, Boris. He had a really good effort. Lyndon wasn't so great, to be honest. It was sort of typical Lyndon Arthur, where he boxes at his own pace. He's nice and relaxed. He flicks that left arm out, but there's always just that you can do more. It's a frustration to watch him because he's technically very good, and he can punch harder than I think his record suggests. But he just doesn't want to commit until he has to, and it took him most of the fight really to get before he really made a dent on Boris Crighton. So yeah, it was at the end of the day. I think for Lyndon Arthur, where he's been now, the fact that he's already beat Anthony Yard, who's shown that he's world level, you have to be more critical. And that what he should have done better against a guy who's been boxing more at super middleweight than light heavy. Let's be honest, coming at late notice. So even if he's fit, he's not conditioned to the same, the 10-round distance at the pace or 12 rounds. That's what Lyndon was training for. So he had opportunities to look better, and he didn't take them. Though you got to give Crichton his credit for committing, and he found a home for that right hand quite early, and he exposed Lyndon at times for that lazy left arm, but. Yeah, it was all in all, it was an underwhelming performance I felt from Arthur.
Yeah, it kind of started as some Lyndon Arthur fights do, Andy. It looked a bit tentative, and Barry's mentioned there about flicking behind the jab, and it wasn't for me really until I think after the 7th round, somebody had told him that he was behind on the broadcast, the broadcast scorecard, and then 8, 9, and 10, of course, the last punch of the fight was a knockdown. We saw Lyndon Arthur sort of inject a little bit of pace into his work, but up until that point, it seemed to be missing from his performance.
He can tend to just do enough, can't he? And I think what Barry said there is right, because he's got that win against Anthony Yard. Okay, Yard avenged it, but it happened. The defeat in a rematch doesn't erase the first fight. So after something like that, what you want is you want to see your fighter kind of like swell and inflate and think to themselves, that's the level I'm at now. If somebody gets me an opponent which isn't really up to that kind of level, I need to take care of them. I need to stamp my authority on fights and show people what I'm about. This is where I should be. Or if you're boxing Boris Crighton, all respect to him, this is not where I should be. This is a showcase for me on a great platform to show people that I belong at a higher level than this, and that's where you'll see me soon. But he doesn't really do that. He's got the skills, but he tends to do enough. And there's been plenty of fighters who do that down the years, and they are frustrating. And you probably feel like, as a promoter, that you will be the one who will get that next bit out of them. Remember Rigondeaux? I'm not comparing Lyndon to Rigondeaux particularly, but Rigondeaux.
No, you've said it. No, that's ridiculous.
But Rigondeaux, everybody looked at him and just thought, I think there was a lot of people who looked at him and just thought, I'm going to be the one who will make him more kind of fan friendly. And no one could ever really do it because it was just hardwired into him to just win fights.
Yeah. He's a bit like this, isn't he, Lyndon Arthur? Like, this is how I fight.
Yeah, there you go, exactly.
I don't give a shit what anyone else says. Yeah. I fight this way and this way only. If you don't like it, don't come. But and you got to half admire that. And you got your style is your style. You got to box to your strengths, but he can do more. And I think in fights like Boris Crichton, listen, Boris Crichton, that might be his coming out party. Even though he lost, he gained in defeat, I feel, for the level he's been at,
sure,
to the level he was then. So he might turn out to be a better fighter than we thought he was, or no one knew him. That's the truth of it. So he might turn out to be a much better fighter. So we might look back and go, well, actually, it was a good performance by Arthur because Crichton turned out to be brilliant. But for what we think we know at this stage, and that all the advantages that Lyndon Arthur has in natural size and experience and preparation for the fight, he should have put on a more dominant performance, because you could watch it and think he could do more, put more weight behind the jab, other things. And he's at that stage of his career now where he has to, because it's a fantastic division. There's 5 other fighters clearly above him right now who are all pushing to maybe hopefully fight each other for world honours. Right down to Dan Aziz, who's the European champion, or Craig Richards probably maybe just behind him now, but he won't be getting mentioned. He won't be mentioned with those names. No, after that, and still he's going to be outside looking in still. Where you think, because he got that win over Anthony Yard, he should be in that it should be the Super 6, but it's not. It's the what would 5 be? Fabulous 4. What would 5 be?
I don't know.
The Fantastic 5.
There we go.
Yeah. So that's what it will be.
But that's it. We're not asking him to go gung ho and change his style. Just do what he does by all means, because it's nice and clean and smooth. Yeah. But just put a bit more oomph into it.
It's just the injection of pace, and it came in the 8th, 9th, and 10th. Like after he was told, I can't remember who it was, but somebody in the corner mentioned that he was behind on the broadcast cards. He came out. I don't think he was, but I think maybe it was one of those where somebody says you're behind.
It was close enough.
Yeah, it was close enough. I mean, after 7 rounds, 4-3 to Arthur is a perfectly acceptable card. I suppose if you have it that close, there's a chance maybe you could have it the other way. I personally didn't, but in the 8th and 9th he came out and there was a bit more intent in his work, a little bit more of an injection of pace. He started to bring the right hand into play, which we hadn't seen up to that point.
Mad, isn't it?
And then in the last couple of rounds, when that right hand started to land, I mean, the shot that landed pretty much on the bell was a beautiful shot, beautiful right hand. And you just sort of think that if we'd have had that in 3, 4, 5, you'd expect him to. Well, he did. He made an impression late in the fight. He could have ground him down, but unfortunately, as we often quite find ourselves saying about Lyndon Arthur, we didn't quite see it right. We do have to move on, but before we move on, one name from each of you. Who next for Lyndon Arthur?
Well, I would like to see him get into that mix.
Yeah, how though?
Aziz.
Barry? I'm not suggesting you, but a different name.
If let's say he fights one of those, you won't like this, Craig Richards. I like him, but Craig Richards, I think would be a fight that I think he has more of a chance of winning. I'd still make Richards a favourite in that, but I think Dan Aziz is all wrong for him. Dan Aziz's energy, especially after seeing what Crichton could do with less movement, with less acceleration and pace in his footwork, especially. I think Aziz is a hard fight for Lyndon Arthur. So and the other guys are maybe slightly a step above. So I would say Richards would be a fantastic fight. But how do they make that fight? Let's be honest.
That's the problem. I'd like to see that too. Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, that probably is a better for Lyndon Arthur. That is a better choice than Aziz.
because I think Richards likes to box, but he'll put more pressure on him, and I think that might force him to see a better Lyndon Arthur. But yeah, but either way, he doesn't start a favourite with any of those guys, which is no shame because they're all good quality fighters. But but he's a good kid. He's a good kid. He still has a relatively bright future. But yeah, he needs to in fights like that. He needs to show more. And he didn't. So and he's given the platform. Everything was in his favour there, and he didn't take that opportunity. So as a promoter, I would imagine, and a broadcaster, you'd probably be frustrated that he didn't do that.
Yeah, either one of those is fine for me. I think, it's going to be difficult because it depends where Craig Richards kind of sees himself, I suppose. Obviously, he had that fight with Dimitri Bivol a couple of years ago, which he lost, but still. But
offer the spot on terrestrial TV. I don't know how good the money would be, but offer the spot if his promoter would allow him. Well, why wouldn't his promoter allow him? Because he's just getting exposure for his fighter. Yeah. So I think
in a fight that people would pick him to win.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's a good thing for him and for Lyndon. He gets a win over him, and then they'll open the door. Then and he's in the conversation with the guy who pushed Dimitri Bivol, who's clearly the number one in the division, or clearly number one in some eyes, maybe not in mine. But yeah, and then he's back in the conversation.
Yeah, he boxed Shakan Pitters on Channel 5, didn't he? Different promoter. It was Hennessy at the time, and I know it was... And
that was a big win for him at the time.
Yeah, it was a massive win.
Really big.
Good win, yeah.
Right, moving along onto Saturday night at the Telford International Centre. I think we all kind of expected...
Oh, hang on a minute. Why didn't we start with the other one first and then come on to this one?
No, we're going to come on to this one first. We're going to bring everybody up. And then, a little bit. But anyway, Ionut Baluta, who in my mind is... If he's not my favourite away fighter of recent years, he's right up there because he's always brilliant value when he comes over. And as we saw again this past weekend, Andy, with a split decision win over Andrew Cain in a fight where, we are still relatively early in the year, even though the year's kind of disappearing in front of our eyes, but that's going to have to be up there towards the end of the year for your fight of the year.
Yeah, it was just... It's one of those bills where I had a good feeling about it because I liked that venue. I've been there once myself, only the one time, but I like it when promoters take shows to parts of the country that maybe other promoters don't really go to. It's a decent sized venue. The kind of setup around it, there's a big shopping centre next to it and plenty of bars and pubs and
bleachers like that,
and all that stuff. Yeah, it's good. It's a good venue, and you pack it out. You get Heaney down there. It's near Stoke. He brings all of his mob, and it's just good. It works. And the fights were good. And that was a really good fight. And Baluta, like you say, you have to love that guy because he's got a good story, he's got good energy about him, good personality. And it's a kind of contest for Cain where he'll be sore at losing, of course, but at the same time, how much does it really matter in the context of his career? You could argue it's certainly not some kind of terrible setback. It's a step forward almost in a lot of ways. He'll have learned a hell of a lot from that fight because I wouldn't say he got found out. That would be going too far, but he's kind of pulling out sort of quite high. He got hit by quite a lot of right hands, didn't he? There's things like that maybe haven't happened to him before, where you can rely on those reflexes and think to yourself, okay, this is how I can do this, and then you maybe go up a level and you think, oh, actually, hang on, I can't, or not all the time. I've got to get my hands up a bit more. That kind of thing. So yeah, the lessons learned from it will be massive.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's very similar to you there, and Barry kind of put it to you in a sense of it was almost the perfect night really for Andrew Cain from a development point of view, but of course on the back of a loss now as opposed to a close decision win, which I did have Cain a round up.
Who?
I had Cain a round up.
Yeah, I mean, I had Cain 2 rounds up. I think. Let me go back anyway. But I thought you won, but not. I didn't scream when he didn't get it. But after the first 4 rounds, I thought, he's put on not a masterclass, but he's dominant. After the first round, he wasn't going past. He was getting knocked out in the second, Baluta, wasn't he? Definitely. And I think, touching on what Andy said there, what he found out for the first time, not about he can't hurt a guy, because he could hurt him. And I say this all the time, this is my new pivot. But it's the same P. He never panics when he's hurt, Baluta. I think that's a quality fighter when you step up in levels. So they don't panic under pressure. They don't get frustrated. They don't get flustered. They don't know what not to do when they're hurt. And I think Cain found out for the first time in his career. The other guys he've hurt, they've either looked for a way out, were knocked out cold, or felt sorry for themselves, which is okay, understandable. and this guy didn't. All he's thinking about, how can I win the fight?
It is always really interesting, isn't it, that way? Where, when you first of someone gets someone in front of them who, if you like, isn't cooperating. You just think, hang on a second, what's supposed to happen now is, and that isn't what happens.
Well, Freitas is like through an interpreter. Like his coach said about when he beat me up, that like later I saw him in Sheffield. He boxed Daniel Lacia on the undercard of when Paul Ingle collapsed, bless him, and Richie Woodall got beat by Joe Kazagi. That was the first time that he beat someone up, but they wouldn't give in. So he learned a lot from that because he was blown out of his ass. Like he just you know what I mean? And so he learned, like, even though he beat me up. He said it was such a great learning fight for him because he just, other people he'd hit had just gone on the floor. And I was knocked out cold or just didn't want to get back up. So he knew that. Now everyone's, I'm stepping in levels now, and everyone's gonna. Some people want to win more. So you get to that level, some people just want to win more. They have that grit in them and whatever it is, and that's what makes them good and better fighters than others. It's not always about ability, it's other stuff. And he's learned that actually it's not all about just being a bully. I got to learn how to do other stuff, and I have to learn how to box. And I think Cain boxed really well. Like he was dancing around superb, like brilliant. He was making him miss. His head movement was fantastic, everything. But he dines out on power. That's his strength. And Baluta will not give in. Throws punches when he's hurt. Continuously, if he hits you with one, he's going to throw 4 after that every time. You know, he's a guy who builds on confidence, everything he does. And it was a struggle for him. But I still thought he won. So I feel disappointed for him in that win. But I think on the long scheme of his career, I think Carl Frampton went a bit crazy saying he's still guaranteed to be a world champion. I think it's a long way to go to see that. I didn't see that. Even if he would have won, which I thought he did, I didn't see that automatically. But you do think he's potentially good enough to be around getting close to that mix. But he gets the wrong result, and it is a setback. Whether you like it or not, it's a setback for his confidence. You think, I can't hurt people, or and he was hurt a few times, and then later in the fight, he got seriously hurt, and he was under pressure, and that'll be something that he's going to have to mentally get over.
I think for me, similar to his stablemate Nick Ball, they're both like got that sort of twitchy style. They're both big shots loading up from the get-go, as it were. And you could see after 5 or 6 rounds him just start to slow down, and Baluta's still there. He's still coming at you, and he was down twice in the first round. He was hurt several times in the first 3 rounds, but he's still there and still coming back. And that's kind of what I mentioned with it. If he had got the decision, you kind of look at that as, okay, there's definitely things to work on. Particularly, I felt like defensively Cain was too open, certainly in the second half of the fight, which I think is probably down to fatigue as well, and all of the other bits. But if he would have got it then, it would have been the type of fight that could sort of make you. One question that I have on him is, he mentioned before the fight about dropping down to bantamweight. Do you think that's a wise move for him, Barry?
It's, like Kazag used to say, I mentioned him, wouldn't I? But if you don't struggle to make the weight, you're in the wrong weight. But that might be an old-fashioned way of looking at things. But and you've got to be careful how much of a struggle it is. He's compact. He's full of muscle. So I don't know how he gets down to where he is now. He might not be the tallest of fighters, but you got to be careful. If you can make it comfortable, if you can make it and still retain that physical strength, then it's a massive plus, because he's a giant then for his weight, isn't he? He
was 120 this past weekend, so he was only £2 over bantam.
Well, there you go. Maybe he can, but why isn't he there now? That would be the argument. Why wasn't he there from the beginning then? It seems ludicrous to be going up a weight where you don't need to be. But if you can make that weight, then yeah. But I think you might be looking, having that, if getting used to, your body gets used to boxing at a certain weights and having that comfort zone. Sometimes some people need to be tight at the weight all the time. Some people just need to have that little bit of a comfort zone and box better with the energy. So you have to weigh it up for yourself, and who knows what it's going to be like. But either weight he's in, world level, it's very difficult. That's unfortunately what it's like. So it should be. But domestically, maybe it helps him. But he boxed well. I think he boxed well, and all that. And the way he fights, he's going to drain energy. But like the guy in your t-shirt, on your jacket there, George Groves, he had the same. It's what you give to what you lose. If you got power, but you want to put the pressure on him early, and you have that wide stance, it takes all the energy to throw your shots. But you might get him out there early, so you risk fading in the later rounds. And so it's how you weigh it up.
That's it.
Like if you haven't got power, then someone like me, you have to make sure you're always fit, always mobile, and always got plenty in the tank for later on without losing too many of the early rounds. You have to be aware of that. Or you win loads, or you win loads of early rounds, but you know you got like Caleb Plant, and then you got enough in the tank to run around and just nick 1 or 2 at the end, but just sail just skip home just about. Is how you weigh it up.
That's what's so valuable about it, isn't it, experience-wise? Because going 10 rounds, people talk about clicking up through the rounds 4, 6, 8, 10, and someone might go 10 for the first time and they win like 9-1, and I've got the 10 rounds in the tank. But it's when you do 10 for the first time in a really competitive fight. Yeah. That's how you learn, as you just described it, how you plot your way through a fight. And hopefully he'll look back at this and in the context of his career, it'll be kind of one of the most important nights he had, because he learnt so much that he thinks, like you say, I'm going to get him out of there early. And then it doesn't happen. And then in future, you'll see the signs, won't you? You'll hit someone clean, they go down, but you'll look in their eyes and think, okay, it was a good shot, but he's not on the brink, and it's plotting your way through.
I think you look back and think, because at a certain stage he thought, I need to take a bit of a rest here, which is right, and I need to reserve a little bit, but I can box, and he boxed well. Yeah. But someone like Baluta, you give him some confidence by you moving back, gives him confidence moving forward, and then the momentum shift is in his favour, and then you've got to stop him. And that's difficult then all of a sudden. So sometimes you've got to try and manoeuvre it where you're taking a rest but putting the pressure on. That's where the big great fighters like Canelo and all them, they use that front foot, Golovkin, to put you under pressure. Golovkin is a puncher, there you go. He puts under pressure with the feet. Sometimes Usyk, better, puts pressure on the feet without throwing lots of punches. So he's not doing loads of work, but he's making you panic, and he's not giving you any sort of momentum to wear him down. That's the cruiserweight Usyk, of course. So, and maybe that's a debate because of his sort of style and strength, and even though he has good ability, not giving that fighter like Baluta an opportunity to feel confident again.
And the fight kind of played out that way. It was more like the psychology of the fight, I feel like, is the big thing for Cain to learn from. Obviously the physical side of things and the stamina and knowing about going the rounds, but you could see in the fight with Baluta as somebody so experienced, has kind of been through the fire and boxed. Michael Conlan had that great win over Brad Foster. He was like, okay, probably didn't expect to be on his ass twice in the first round, and probably didn't expect the early rounds to be as hard as they were, but he'd have had a good idea, and then he was able to see those through and then just make Cain start doubting himself.
Baluta is to Queensbury what Lara is to Matchroom. A pain in the ass.
Yeah, I was surprised when they made it. But I mean, also, you know what you're going to get from him, and that you know that if you're not at a certain level, then you're not going to pass the test, which is perfect.
Sorry, but Cain did. Sorry, I know you
go on.
But Cain did really well. I think he did really well. It was a great fight to watch. Let's not forget that. All the technical shit. It was a brilliant fight to watch. And Cain showed loads of toughness in that fight as well. Yeah, fired back. When he looked to fire back, I
think to his detriment towards the end of the fight, I felt like there was times where he probably could have done with holding and maybe trying to run the clock down, and he was trying to have it back with Baluta as well. And again, those are things that he'll be able to learn from. For next time,
I just think that the positives far outweigh the negatives. The negative is the L, obviously, and it'll sting. He won't like it. He'll be fuming about
also
it
because he probably didn't really deserve it.
Yeah, he'll be fuming about it. But I do think it's hopefully it's one of those fights where in the context of your career you look back on it and you just think that was perfect. Actually
learned a lot from that. Okay, Andy, going to come to you. You've mentioned there about doing the Telford International Centre before, and Nathan Heaney's raucous Stoke army that seemed to follow him around every which way. Saw the Jack Flatley rematch after a probably less than satisfactory end to their first fight on the Joyce Parker undercard. Thought Nathan Heaney boxed well, got the unanimous decision win.
Yeah, he's an interesting bloke all round, because you chat to him and you realise that you're speaking to someone who is really switched on when it comes to his own career. He sells his own tickets. He's built that fan base himself, so he understands his worth in that sense. But he also understands that he's got to keep improving because he's ambitious and he wants to get a good level. He doesn't just want to be a ticket seller. He doesn't want to be remembered as somebody who was just a ticket seller. So he does work really hard in the gym, and I know that's a prerequisite for anyone who wants to achieve anything. But you look at his conditioning, and every time I see him fight, I do feel like he's better than he was the previous time I saw him. Yeah. And you can't really ask for much more than that. As for how far that will take him, he's in his early 30s, 32, 33, I think he is now. So he hasn't got ages left, but he is trying to maximise every ounce of what he's got. And that was a good performance because he's a good fighter, Flatley. He is a good fighter. I wonder how quickly they'll kind of move him, or what they'll try and move him towards next, Heaney, because the problem he's got is that middleweight division domestically is quite tough, and I wouldn't really fancy him against. I wouldn't fancy him against Denzel Bentley or Linus Adofia or Felix Cash or any of those
Hamza
guys.
Shiraz.
Yeah,
right? So
that's the problem.
One of our better divisions domestically. Barry, I kind of mentioned to you before we got started, I thought he did a little bit of everything, Nathan Heaney. I thought he boxed at times. Obviously had a good tear up at times, much to the delight of the fans. But I thought it's probably the best that I've seen him.
Ring work's fantastic. Let's not forget that. It's leverage great, isn't it?
It's
fantastic.
Incredible, yeah.
They shouldn't play that song though. But if that was Welsh rugby, we wouldn't be able to play it. But it was brilliant. And he started really fast, but then he changed, and I like that because he put the pressure on Flatley straight away. Like leathered him with punches. Flatley was so tough. His face was red raw after 30 seconds. Kept piling forward, trying to win the fight, firing every time Heaney threw each other fire back. But Heaney boxed well. Then he moved all of a sudden, showed a different side of his game. Well, we've seen it before, but this is under a different pressure. And he got really long arms, haven't he, Heaney? He's just got really
just big. He's got big middleweight, like really big.
So he's boxing really well. And he looks ungainly at times. You think, someone with a better structure might put it on him. But I think he's awkward to close the gap with him. And it was really he boxed really well. In a fight which was looking like it might have been difficult the first time round, he maybe knew I have to start fast and be positive here now, and he was. And then when we thought he was ahead, he tried to keep enough in the tank by moving around and boxing, picking his shots, changing direction with his feet. It was a good result. And the problem you've got with him as a promoter, from a promoter's perspective, is you want to move him up, but you don't want to get him beat because he's such a good ticket seller. So you put him on the undercard of a better fighter who can't sell tickets. That's what happens. And then that crowd are cheering for the main event.
Joyce Parker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that and it helps, but he will have ambitions. He want to go, and you've got to say Denzel Bentley in the same camp, and that's got to be the next sort of step for him, close to. Though Denzel will probably think he's at world level, no, rightly so, and he'll want to stay there. So, but then you don't see him beating Denzel Bentley. But with his style, and awkwardness, he might pose a few problems probably. But yeah, I don't know where you go with the next actually. And
it's tricky,
the Felix Cash fight, I would right now, if out of all those names were mentioned, that's the fight I would take.
Yeah, because he's not quite looked the same fighter.
He hasn't, to be. No, he's really skillful, but something seems to be around his chin. He looks weaker on the chin, and I never saw that before. And I don't know whether there's an issue or something with weight, or you've had problems. I don't know what it is. I know he ballooned out when he was out. Yeah. He ballooned up and coming back. Maybe that's an issue, but he hasn't looked the same. Did we discuss that the last time I was here?
No, but we will discuss it later on because we've got the Anthony Joshua, Jermaine Franklin preview. But before we move on from the Telford International Centre, a quick chat about a quick performance from certain Moses Itauma. Another first-round stoppage win, I think 34 seconds, Andy. Still, obviously, very, very early days in a very, very young career, but Itauma did what we all expected him to do and won in impressive style.
Yes, and the question with him as of what's next is just gets more and more interesting, doesn't it? Because they just got to remember how young he is. And I don't think anyone's going to forget that, but the size of him and the ability that he definitely does have, you don't want him to stagnate, but at the same time you don't want to move him too quick either, because if something damage can be done at that age psychologically, that it can be difficult to recover from if you move a fighter too fast. But at the same time, 2 30-second blowouts is fine in his first 2 fights, but they need to try and get him some rounds. Yeah. It's going to be expensive, though, because not that many people are going to fancy that job, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and it looks as though he's going to be back on the Joyce Zhang undercard, which is keeping him nice and busy, Barry.
I think it's important. What I would do with him is, you want to get him TV exposure, but you don't want to put too much pressure on him, if I can get my words out. So what I would do, I would put him on early and record it, and just show the highlight of him knocking someone out. Don't forget we had and slot it in somewhere on the TV slot. I think just keep him busy, because he's boxing people, because it doesn't look great when he's boxing a guy who looks about my size, and he'll get criticised for that. But then, as rightly as Bunty was saying on the broadcast, they did that with Mike Tyson. But not all of Mike Tyson's fights were broadcast, so they just show a clip of it or whatever. So, I think that's him. Just keep him busy all the time. So he's in the gym all the time. He's learning how to adapt to the pros a little bit, though I don't think he needs that much of it. And And he's getting those blowouts to build that confidence, and then every now and again slip in a decent fight. But I wouldn't just put the pressure on having him on TV all the time, just in case, like live all the time, just in case the criticism again. He might try, and they might want to get a bigger guy then because they're under pressure to make it look more competitive for him, and then he might have a harder fight than he needs at this stage because he's a baby. All is trying to beat Mike Tyson's record.
Do you just sort of butting on that, but the beating Mike Tyson's record thing, what do you make of all of that?
Because I think it's just a statement you bring out, just for some more publicity, and it's fine. And maybe he will. Who knows? In this era now,
May 2025, is it that they were talking about to get it done?
Because if Dubad relinquishes his WBA world title,
regular.
Well, it is what it is. No, he can box nobody for that. No, like, so it doesn't matter, does it? Or he can go down to Bridgerweight and win one of those things. But if he can make the weight, I doubt it. No. But either, I just think just keep him busy. Just get him loads of fights, loads of exposure, get him comfortable, and just a little step up now and again. Give him a southpaw, give him a tall, skinny guy who can't punch, give him a guy who can punch but can't take a punch, and then give him a guy who can punch who can take a punch, and all that shit. I think you build a heavy, because the financial rewards for everyone around the heavyweight are so great that you promote them different to any other fighter. You want to develop them, but without getting them hurt, and especially a young guy. Because whoever he is, he's young, and I turned pro at 18, and you're boxing, and I was a top amateur, not as good as him, but I was a top class amateur, world class amateur even. But once you, there's no different. Even sometimes the quality is worse, but they're men.
Yeah,
it's a big difference.
We spoke about it a few times, haven't we?
Yeah, they're physically men. Strong. Some of them, and you can No, he might not be. He might be physically strong, but it's a different strength. They know how to use it. They lean on you. They pull you. They push you. They hit you on the back of the head. All those things you don't know. They pull your elbows, and they do all the stuff you don't really see, but you feel it. And some kids fall apart at that, or lose their shape, get frustrated, all that crap. I go back to as my first senior fight. It wasn't technically my senior fight, but I was 16. I boxed a kid who got to the Welsh senior final actually, and I dropped him twice in the first 2 rounds with body shots. What a performance that was going to be for me. And then he kissed me. We got in a clinch and he kissed me on the cheek and my head went. Now, I still won the fight easy, but we were on the distance. I learned so much from that because he made me lose my shape. He did something. And that's what these guys can do. And they won't, no, I'm not going to kiss you unless you're lucky like me. But I mean, they'll pinch you. If they can't tell with the gloves nowadays, can you?
Yeah, they can't do it.
Yeah, pinch you, or they'll bite you, or they'll say something to you, or they hit you on the leg, or they do silly things you don't really see sometimes, and then you go, what? And they do it twice, or they'll say something to you, and so it's the development with the heavyweight has to be very cradled. So if he gets to the record, brilliant, but I wouldn't aim for it. Just let it be natural.
How soon do we see Moses Itauma versus a Kamil Sokolovsky type, Andy?
I wouldn't say there's any desperate rush to do that. I think it'll happen fairly soon. But I'm just a big believer with him and with all young fighters, but particularly him, is just getting fighting as regularly as you possibly can. Because Tyson, if you want to use Tyson as an example, I think Tyson got to 27-0 in 18 months. As a professional,
he got 15 times in his first.
Yeah,
I got to 10-0 in 18 months.
Yeah,
but that's amazing.
And he was just never, ever, ever out of the gym. And one of the reasons they needed to keep him there is because if he wasn't in the gym, then he was good at 2 things: boxing and getting himself into serious trouble. And if he wasn't doing one, he's doing the other one. So you had to keep him doing that one thing. But it was also the right thing to do, obviously, from a boxing point of view. And I just think it's always the right thing to do with a top class amateur who's turned pro, because they're used to being in the gym all the time. It's all they know. They're waiting for tournaments, but they're in the gym all the time. Tournaments come along. There's not really camps. You're just always in shape because you've got to weigh in every day, obviously, or every other day. So just keep him there. And I think that idea about not always putting him on TV is a good idea, because if you want him to box every few weeks, you're not always going to be able to get him somebody great. And then that fight night outing, might be a bit of a shambles,
but
it doesn't really matter because it won't matter because you'll just show the knockout, and just get him used to just get that treadmill of fight week and what it involves and different places. Maybe get him out try and get him out on a foreign card or something. You know, if you've got some pals who've got putting on a card in Europe, just get him out on one of them. See, you know, that's a different experience to have, that kind of thing.
The return of Queensbury, Poland.
Exactly, that sort of thing. I don't know whether, I mean, they've got loads of links, they could get him on something, but...
Top rank, couldn't they? They work with it. That's the game over.
Just loan him out to someone for a night.
I know I put him on that 8th of April fight, if I could get him on there, in New Jersey. Jared Anderson's on the bill, isn't he? Shakur Stevenson, and get him on that.
Michaela Mayer's fighting on Joyce's undercard. There's stuff happening between Queensbury and Top Rank. They've got a really good relationship.
Just see him as busy and as often as possible. Right, now on to the other show on Saturday night. Lawrence Okolie against David Light. We all sat here last week and predicted a stoppage win for Lawrence Okolie. Most of us, if not all of us, expected it to be fairly routine, which I think in a way, Andy, it kind of was. It was a clear, dominant decision win for Lawrence Okolie, but again, one where we find ourselves scratching our heads a little bit. Actually, I've got an itch. I wasn't doing that on purpose. With Lawrence Okolie's performance.
Nits.
Yeah. He's an enigma, Lawrence, in a lot of ways, because you look at what he's achieved in such a short space of time. 26 amateur.
Enigma.
Siri?
Enigma.
26 amateur fights.
Yeah.
Only 19 as a pro. And you look at what he's won, and you look at the fact that no one's even come remotely close to beating him. And you can think to yourself, well, what more do you want? I mean, what more can you expect of somebody? But because we know that he can land that right hand, and he does have these basic tools to box this big man fight that we like to talk about, plant the jab, which he never does. Wouldn't it be great if he could learn how to do that? And then throw that right hand. He can be good to watch. He can be explosive. But he rarely has been in his pro career up until this point. And I think that's the frustration, is that we all feel like there is more to come. And we've seen glimpses of it, but we haven't seen it regularly enough. But then again, not just the fact that he's got a great record and what more do you expect, but he had also been out of the ring for a year, and he's got a new trainer, and there was a lot going on in the background during that year which won't have been easy. So there's things that mitigate it, but at the same time, I said to Andy on the way out the arena, Andy, that I can never work out whether I need to be harder on him or whether I'm being too hard on him. I just can't. I don't know. I can't figure it out, because 19-0, British Commonwealth European World Champion. Nobody's come remotely close to beating him, but we just feel like he can be box office. That's the key, and Sky definitely want him to be box office, but Saturday night was not box office.
No, it wasn't.
But shout out to David Light, because what we didn't know going into that fight was how solid his chin was.
Yeah.
He didn't carry his hands as low as he had done previously when we'd watched him. He was very, very tough. And I did predict a stoppage, but based on the fact that we know how hard Okolie can punch, and he did look like he was going to be that hard to hit, David Light. He was actually a bit harder to hit than he first appeared. But when he did get hit, he got cracked with 3 right hands.
10th round, I think it was.
In the space of about 10 seconds. Yeah. And he didn't go down, which was pretty remarkable. And that's like one other thing to add into the sort of whole narrative of the fight, is if he had finished him in that round, Okolie, the way people talked about it would be different, I think. They would say, well, it took him a bit of time to do this, that and the other, and ring rust, blah, blah. But then when he found that right hand, he locked on and it was lights out and all that kind of thing. But David Light is a tough dude.
He's harder to hit when you're not throwing the right hand, isn't he?
Yeah.
If you're not throwing a punch, if you're not throwing a proper punch, then he's possible to hit.
Yeah.
You throw the punch to hit him. I think it's like he's frustrating. He is. And again, you got the win, and again he hasn't been touched and all that crap, but he's going to want big money. He might be getting big money. I think the boxers have probably gone out their way to get him. Like that might be a waste of time. I don't know. He's a good fighter, and he's not a good fight. He's not a good fight to watch. That's the difference. He's a good fight, not a good fight to watch. Now that's fine. But if you can't, you box.
But it's not fine though, is it?
It's not. No,
he's not boxing to his strengths, is he? That's what I would say. You interrupt me.
Well,
just dying for him to just plant that jab.
Yeah.
They released a bit of pad work during the week, him and Sugar Hill, which is the most basic thing you'll ever see in your life. But I really liked it, where he's just holding up the one pad, and it's just like tap, bang, and you just think he's drilling that distance, getting him used to where the distance is, and then on Saturday night we'll see him. He knows that David Light's going to walk in on him, and he's going to back himself, hold his feet a bit more, and then just let that 1-2 go.
But Shane McGuigan was doing the same thing. Shane McGuigan, the love of your life. But like he was doing the same thing. He had him doing like the right things. He just when he gets to a fight, he decides, I don't want to do it now. I don't know what, or maybe just you go back to your default mode of trying to stay safe or whatever it is. But this touch, like he got that telescopic reach. It's crazy. Forget about his height. His reach is beyond his height.
Yeah.
Like you can, like the guy can't get near you if you don't, like you were saying in commentary. Thank you. Like if you just turn from your hips and your shoulders, you don't have to lean forward. He's trying to throw a right hand like this fella here, the Canadian Lennox Lewis, right? He's trying to throw a right hand like that and lean his body into it, which is great. You got loads of levers, loads of power, and you literally knock a guy in the next week. But you also shorten the distance, so you have to know to lean your head to one side and commit to it. But he would do it off a solid jab to already knocked you back. He touching, and wants to throw that. He should be watching Klitschko. Like you said, and just keeping that and just having the outs like that. Just turn. You'll get the distance because your back hip goes where your front hip was, but on the opposite side, it goes the same length. So you're still going to reach and you're going to punch through the target, but you don't want to extend. So he can't get near you. It's impossible. He should never get hit with a punch when he's been going forward. But a solid jab, and he was doing it with Shane McGuigan, but then stopped doing it in another fight, and the whole ethos of the Kronk style, that's what was called, I suppose, was behind a solid left-hand jab. There's a ramrod jab. Tyson Fury now uses a ramrod jab rather than just flicking with it. So he can win so easily, and he should have got him out there. And David Light was massively tough, and give him his credit to that. But when he's throwing that right hand, I was saying I was doing the radio for the commentary. I was saying he's throwing that right hand over the left guard, which is landing, and he feels it light, but the shot is down the middle. And that shot down the middle it seems that you'd see it because it's straight, but it's more disguised because you don't bring your elbow up and you don't loop it over the top. And there's so many things, even the guy has to take it, he sees enough to brace for it. Yeah. That one, you don't. You hit him with a solid jab, so he feels that. Oh, you see stars, and now wait, you see stars, and then you go, wow. You don't try and knock him out with it, you just whip it. Right down the middle.
When he got through, it was that straight. It was that slingy straight right hand. It's right down the middle. It's like it was interesting listening to Sugar Hill.
I wouldn't have Okolie throw a left hook in training. I mean, literally, I would strip him right back to the basics and go like you never boxed before. This is how you hold your hands, mate. So your feet, and you go. And I'd have him moving in lines, front foot, back foot, front foot, back foot, back foot, front foot, and that's how you move back and forth in lines.
But I think they might well have been doing that, but then he just didn't do it on the night, because when you listen to Sugar Hill after, he might have been talking to ID, and he was diplomatic, but you could tell that what he was really saying was, he said basically, I would have liked him to have done more of the things that we've been working on. Yeah. So you can't live between the lines. He basically said he didn't really do what I wanted him to do. And that might be an insoluble problem with Lawrence, is getting him out of that default. Macklin said something interesting at the end of the fight. He did say it on...
From Macklin's podcast?
Yeah.
From the Macklin's take. Right.
Same one.
Available on all podcast outlets.
We did 3 episodes.
I need to get a Macklin's take.
I'm very pleased to hear. But...
you up for an award like I am?
No, okay. We don't enter awards. I just said beneath us. What he said was, and this was when the broadcast had finished, but we were just kind of like musing about it on the way out of the arena, and he just said maybe Okolie kind of doesn't really want to set and punch and moves the way he does because he doesn't really trust his chin. I never really thought of that, because I did see him get stopped by Erislandy Savon in the amateurs, but in the pros, I can't really think of a time where...
Wadi Camacho caught him with the left hand.
Camacho, he's the only one. Yeah. He's the only one, but maybe it is that. I don't know.
That's what I was going to say. It's you touched on it there. It's the risk side of things, and that's what I feel like he's missing. I understand kind of drilling and working to what he's good at with the right hand in particular, and just setting that up. But it's almost like what we saw on Saturday, and what we also saw against Sislak, is like the lack of adventure in his work. It's all very safe. He's flicking with the jab and he's moving away every time he's doing it. It's that failure to commit with his shots. It's something that Shane McGuigan had said after the Sislak fight, which is of course the last time he boxed, and that doesn't help having the period of time out of the ring. And we've mentioned there, I mean, the whole fight week was kind of, Eddie Hearn said this, and I said this about Eddie Hearn, and the kind of boxer Matchroom Sky DAZN thing at the minute is as volatile as it's been.
Yeah, it's not helpful. It's not
helpful for anybody, but particularly when you're Lawrence Okolie.
Both sides.
Yeah, for sure. But when you're Lawrence Okolie and you're headlining and you're the face of Sky Sports Boxing, and you got this and you got that, and then like fairly early on, it looked as though it could go the way that it went. Really, after sort of 2 or 3 rounds, you're thinking, "Oh no, we've kind of seen this with Okolie before, where he's not losing the rounds. He's not really in any danger of losing the rounds, but he's not kind of, you don't ever expect to see it coming." Sometimes I remember the Ngannou fight where that was a much messier fight than what we saw against Light, but it was kind of like when he stops you, unless he irons you out quickly, it kind of comes from nowhere. You don't ever sense that he's starting to put the pressure on now and he's starting to get there. He either hits you and you go, or we see kind of what we saw this past weekend.
Yeah, but how does he fare against like a Jay Opataia who's okay,
going to be moving and
in and out with his feet, and what he shot, and listen, the thing with Okolie is that you've got to get him. So that flicking jab is something you can follow. He leans on the back foot with him, to be fair, and can still hit you. That's how crazy long his reach is. So you know it's hard to get, and when he's flicking you with that jab, he must hit you with the right hand. But someone who can feint with their feet and maybe feint and step, like a little dot, like step that way and go that way, which Opataia I think could do that and will commit. Or no, and then he hits you, and all this tying up stuff. I think now that's because. In a rules meeting, your coach is going, if you're boxing Okolie, he holds. If you're not doing that, we're not fighting. If you're not going to cut the warning for that, but he gets warned for it, of course.
Did he get a point? Yeah,
the point taken away.
Because that was it's the 9th round, it's the only round that he didn't win. He drew. So I think that's the problem with him. But the things, if he just does the simple, basic things, all he needs is a jab on a right hand and a double jab on a right hand. That's all he needs. And maybe double up on the right hand sometimes. He doesn't need to throw hooks or uppercuts. He can't fight inside. But with a view of him eventually going into the heavyweight division, which is what it all is to make the money, all the advantages he has at cruiserweight are massively reduced as he gets to heavyweight. So flicking with the jab now works where, because you sit in the back foot and you're boxing guys who are 6'3", 6'2", 6'1", and you're having the advantages. It's not going to work when you're boxing a guy who's 6'6".
Yeah, and that strength, that wrestling strength on the inside is useful wherever you go, but it'll be less effective.
And you're not the octopus up close as you are with those guys, because they're the same as you. So and then you think, all that, I thought with his speed he'd be a real force at heavyweight, but the way he punches won't work, and you just think that I'm looking at that. So, but I think he can be better. He can be much better than he is.
And that's the thing, and that's why people talk about. That's why we discuss him as much as we do, I think, and why he's been as criticised as much as he has been, because the tools look like they're there, and we're just waiting for him to kind of detonate that kind of dynamite we know that he's got. But at the minute, he just kind of sort of buries it.
I've mentioned it a couple of times on the podcast where I interviewed him after the Askin fight. And we all know how bad the Askin fight was with the points taken. I think he got 3 points taken off. Yeah, which we say he's never come close to losing a fight.
Well, DQ.
He has in that instance, but I mean, I remember speaking to him afterwards, and he'd had 2 and 3. I think they'd had the Chamberlain fight, and then I think Luke Watkins was in the middle. And I remember speaking to him afterwards, and it's kind of quite publicly, because he was on a Joshua undercard, and when Joshua managed him, and he'd said, AJ had said, this is an entertainment business, and basically what he's saying is like, mate, the crowd were great until, and then I went and boxed Povetkin and kind of looked around and everybody was half asleep. And he said afterwards that I'd said, what's more important to you really? And it's a bit of a silly question, but I said winning in style or just winning. And he said, look, I want to be an entertaining fighter. Everyone wants to be an entertaining fighter. But ultimately what's important is that I win the fight. And what Macklin said there about him not being confident in his chin, I'm not sure if that's it. But I do think that there is definitely an instance where he thinks I have to risk it here, or I can just do what I'm doing, set up the right hand, and if he gets close, I'll just get hold of him anyway. I'll win 12 rounds to 0. I'll keep my world title, and I'll see you next time.
Which is fine. No,
but it's a problem when you're headlining after all of the furore about face of boxing and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's where the big problem is.
Because outside of the ring, he's got what you need. He's a good personality. He's an interesting kid. He's a good talker. He's confident. I've always liked his style. He takes criticism. He doesn't take it personally. No. He's had plenty of it, and other people who were thinner skinned would have reacted differently.
And he
But I'm
comes
not
across
sure
as
if he.
honest as well,
Yeah,
doesn't
I
he?
Yeah,
think
he's very
he is,
objective.
I think. I mean, I remember Shane saying that he felt that one of the reasons why Okolie would be better at heavyweight would be because he would be almost forced to fight differently for the reasons that Barry explained. And maybe that's what it'll take. If you know that at that weight you can just grab hold of someone and throw them around, and the chances are you're probably going to win, unless you get a referee who's prepared to be really hardline about it, then it is kind of difficult not to just do that.
Yeah. Just win in any way possible.
He can still box just as safe, almost just as safe as he boxes now, and be far more effective.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to he doesn't have to take the risks. He's not to shorten.
But in his head, it's a risk.
He's actually shortening the punches with the mistakes. He brings that back foot forward all the bloody time. He's making the mistakes, and that's why he's holding on. So he's making those mistakes. I mean, he can eradicate those mistakes. I literally would get him in the ring and I'd nail his front foot to the floor with a real nail. And
old school training.
Yeah, that's what we used to do. That's what we used to do.
That's back in the good old days.
All us limpers. But I mean, literally, that's it, isn't it? Just, he doesn't need to go over that front foot ever.
But it's just getting him to realise that, isn't it? You know,
it's a risk-free way to fight and be much better.
In his head,
he still has to change.
He's got a mental block with it, hasn't he? It's like, you know, when someone's learning to. I remember when I went skiing when I was a kid, and the first time I went, there's a point to this. The first time I went, I was horrible. The first week I went, I was rubbish because I couldn't get my head around the idea that the best thing to do is point down the hill. I just thought, I've got to lean back or I'm going to go too fast and crash. Once you've kind of got over that counterintuitive thing, or what for you seems counterintuitive, you think, oh, actually, yeah.
It's like abseil, isn't it? When you got to go over the edge.
If he could just do it once. And I think just Light was the guy, because you knew that Light was going to walk in on you, and that's what he wants to do. And so in one sense you think, okay, well, I need to stop him. I need to not let him do that. No. Let him do that. Hold your feet, have some confidence.
So video him in the gym then and get like a protracted out and all, like get all these analysts, and there are all loads of them nowadays, by the way, and get him to show him mathematically, like the distance
the heat map back.
Yeah, bring back the heat map.
That was good. That was great, the heat map, wasn't it? It was like a 4-year-old that was coming in on TV, live on TV. That was, but like. It was just literally and just show him the distance that you gain and you don't lose, and maybe if he needs to see it there you go, look, just point it out.
I think what Andy said there. I mean, we obviously watched the interview. He did do it with you called him Andy Andy, which I really like as a nickname for him.
We can't say his last name.
With Sugar Hill, where Sugar Hill said, I think he referred to it as retaining information, and sometimes it takes people a little longer. One day they come into the gym and it clicks, and like we've mentioned there about that Kronk style and kind of big heavyweights and Vladimir and stuff. He's in the right, that's the right fit. But it's just learning.
He was in the right fit with Shane McGuigan.
Yeah, sure.
Same thing. He was trying to do the same thing with him, I think, trying to get him just to be simple and clean. But ultimately, he's still winning. So, we're criticising a guy who never lost a second of the rounds. Who next for
him? We've got the domestic cruiserweight scene, Richard Riakporhe there. I think that can still be made into a big fight.
I don't think it's a good fight to watch still.
I have my reservations
someone gets knocked
about
out cold,
well.
that to be fair, and that you probably would favour Okolie still, but I don't think it's a great fight to watch.
Almost on the back of this past weekend, where you've got Okolie and with all due respect to David Light, not a marquee name and not somebody that we kind of know in this country, to put the performance in that he did this past weekend, which again won every round, but less than inspiring, should we say?
Set up for him to look good.
But it means that now you're not really going to get another one of those. You're not really going to get. They're going to have to do something with him now. Yeah. It needs to be a good fight next, because as you mentioned earlier, I'd imagine he's being paid very well. Head of Sky Sports Boxing and coming over back onto the platform and all of that sort of stuff. So is it going to have to be a Riakporhe next? Is it a Okolie Riakporhe? Or it doesn't seem like Badu Jack's probably looking at Okolie thinking, oh yeah, I fancy that 6 foot, however big he is. And it kind of looks as though it might be that next, Andy, Okolie Riakporhe.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's what they do. I mean, that was a mandatory at the weekend as well. That gets that out of the way, which is always a good thing. But I do think that
WBO rankings up.
I do think that that's what they will be looking at, because
they've already started selling them, they.
Yeah, and they want, with the whole cruiserweight scene, they know they've got a good crop there. They want a world title fight for Billum Smith. It's not that easy to do because they can't get Badu Jack, he's not coming to Bournemouth
Nah.
to fight outdoors.
Definitely
Apatai's
not.
got his mandatory, hasn't he, with Masternak,
Yep.
we believe.
Yeah.
So then you're left with Goulamirian, but Goulamirian knows it. So that might be quite
yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
Exactly. Although if you're him, you don't want to end up pricing yourself out of something which, although you might not feel it's quite enough, is still your best offer.
He's got some promotional issues as well,
Yeah,
and
I believe
he's
so.
just had quite a messy split with his promoter.
Yeah.
Let's just run through quickly the WBO rankings. So obviously, it's not been updated. David Light, mandatory. Number 2, Chris Billam-Smith, of course, former stablemates, but he's boxing on May the 27th in Bournemouth. Richard Riakporhe, number 3. Sergei Kovalev, name would bring value, but again, Kovalev's probably going, me and Badu Jack, naturally smaller, big fight,
Yeah.
probably do that. Yuniel Dorticos, which at this point is a name to us, but in, kind of the wider sense, so you'd probably think that's...
Now there's a man who can throw a lovely long straight
but
right
that's a
hand.
risk.
That's a risk.
That's
though,
a
yes.
risk.
It's a risk, definitely.
Mikhail Sislak, he's just beaten. Masternak's mandatory for Opataya. Richard Rivera, who of course we saw against Badu
Popeye,
Jack.
yeah, get Popeye in.
That
Popeye.
wouldn't be the worst idea.
I think he's
gone
going back down to light heavyweight.
though, hasn't he?
Yeah. Andrew
Tabiti, I was
Tabiti.
going to say Tabiti, yeah.
Tabiti could make
Beast.
Okolie look a little bit...
Tabiti's a good boxer, Tabiti.
Yeah, he's got
Yeah.
good feet, good movement.
But also hittable.
Yeah. And as you
I
know,
remember doing
Dorticos
his
showed
fight.
us.
Yeah, he did. He boxed Dorticos, didn't he?
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the Super Series. I remember that. I did that card, and
He boxed
People-
really, I did the card
yeah.
before. He boxed that Favour, Andrew Favour.
Ruslan Favour.
Ruslan Favour,
Yeah.
yeah. And he boxed really well.
Myris Bradis, number 10. Albert Ramirez, not sure who that is. Brandon Glanton, who of course David Light beat. Ruben Eduardo Acosta, another one for you Argentinian boxing fans. Ryan Rozicki and Jordan Thompson.
yeah, Albert Ramirez. If it's the one I'm thinking of, was a good amateur. Beat Julio La Cruz.
Oh, really?
In WSB.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know whether everybody always said it was a terrible decision. But La Cruz fans, every time he lost a fight, they said
Yeah,
it was an unbelievable robbery. But anyway, that's not really relevant. But there are some decent names on that
I think
list.
But
But
the
there aren't.
The Riakporhe fights that went to me.
Yeah, I think so. You got
Because-
South London versus East London. Both they already had their raw, intense beef at
You
the,
show that,
at the
you show
premiere
that.
the other week, didn't they?
You sell the London rivalry thing, don't you? And let's hope you support two different football teams. That helps. And then you just show that argument with the pushing, and then you just show their high real knockouts.
Look what Sky did
sells.
with
It sells.
the example that the most recent example that I always kind of trot out with things like this is look what Sky did with Lawrence Okolie versus Isaac Chamberlain.
There you
British
go.
Yeah,
beef.
exactly.
They had
Exactly.
11,000 people in
Two
the
Londoners.
O2. They're both of them never won a title, and they're both
Yeah.
under 8 fights
Yeah.
or whatever it was,
Yeah.
and they did a really good job of that. The fight was awful.
Great fight.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's
Awful fight, but let's try.
But they
just-
can. They
can get
they
behind
definitely
it.
can sell it. I just kind of wonder if
And you've got
there's.
2 punches as well. So that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone's going to get knocked out.
I just
but-
wonder with those two whether there's something there
Both
that
got a
goes
stinker in them, though.
that goes back a bit further in the day, because I remember going to see Okolie when he was with Brian O'Shaughnessy, not far from here actually, in Bethnal Green. So it's probably about 2017. And I'd seen Riakporhe down at Miguel's a few times with Isaac Chamberlain and John Harding, and I used to go there quite a bit. And at that stage, you could see, wow, like this guy's an absolute specimen. But I never really heard much about him. And I remember just throwing Riakporhe's name into the mix one day, down at the Cool Box, it was called. And Okolie just kind of laughed. And in a way that just made me wonder whether there was something going on there.
I don't know if there's anything that particularly goes back. Of course, they kind of Riakporhe was around Chamberlain when they boxed, and they're both out of that.
Yeah,
Ted
it could be
family
that. It could be as
stable.
simple as that.
But I don't know if there is. But obviously now there is. There very much is.
Yeah.
And when there's money on the line and a world title, you can make that beef pretty quickly.
It's a sellable fight.
Yeah, really
but
sellable
But I
fight.
still don't think it. The thing with that fight, it might be a really horrible fight to watch, but the finish will be great.
Until somebody gets hold of somebody.
Yeah, somebody
Yeah.
get hurt, and then it might explode.
So
so
remember the
then it won't
Riakporhe
matter.
Jack Massey fight? That was another bad fight. There was a lot of holding in that
Yeah,
fight.
it
He had
was.
points taken off in that fight as well.
Bad
So they can both switch your lights out with a right hand, or they can switch your lights out with
Well, they're both
some terrible
They
infighting.
can
and-
gradually
Yeah,
dim the lights
yeah.
until you just lull you to sleep. Yeah, it's
but like a lot of punchers, because they don't have to do as much learning because they get their power disguises some
They
of
hit
their,
people and they
their,
go,
their
yeah.
flaws. So
Yeah, yeah.
they're technically both flawed.
Right, okay. Moving on to... God, we're still on the preview side of things. What time you got to go? You got to be out of it by 1.
But if I can't pick up my kids, right, he's literally.
Okay, we might have to sack Barry off for the end of it. But
He's
anyway,
going into
we're
care.
going to get there. Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez. We all sat here with Deck Taylor of the George Groves Boxing Club podcast last week and previewed it. We all were very much looking forward to it. Barry, going to come to you first. It kind of went how many of us expected. Deck was the only person who predicted David Benavidez by points.
Yeah.
But we all kind of felt that Plant would have a good spell at the start of the fight before ultimately what we saw happen in David Benavidez's size and punch output just overwhelming Plant down the stretch.
It was literally a fight of two halves, wasn't it? Literally, I mean, right split down the middle. So he had a great start, Plant. He's moving well and picking his spots well, but Benavidez just making him work hard, walking him down, taking shots. Benavidez was quite impressive. He never panicked. He's a volume puncher, but not so much in this fight. He still threw a lot of punches, but nowhere near what he has in the past. But he just winds you down, physically, just on you all the time, that presence. And you could just see slowly the energy starting to wane from Plant, who boxed really well, and tough. That Plant's a really tough, hard kid. He really is. Like, he got hit with some really good shots and always looking to fire back. Now, at the end, at some point, he was almost trying to hold on, wasn't he? Going forward, just tremendous stuff. Really good fight to watch. The fight you expect, to be fair. It was real, good quality work. But when Benavidez lands with one shot, he puts the combination together really well. He really does. Works the body well. Took a while to work the body. When he got there, he worked it well. And sort of the last sort of 4 rounds was beating Plant up, I thought.
It's difficult. I can't remember seeing it. I mean, you know better than me. It's different with Roy Jones because they're very different styles of fighter. But a big man who throws like a triple, quadruple uppercut is just not something that you're accustomed to seeing from a man mountain like that as well.
What he does do, when they're getting close, he finds a space.
Yeah, he was very good at that. He hurt Plant a couple of times with right hands on the inside.
But Plant's really close. Plant's on the right things. He's getting chest to chest. You can't get hurt because he knows he can fight the inside. But all of a sudden, he must turn his shoulder. I got to watch it again, see how he does it. He must turn his shoulder and push you with that one and create the space. Because you usually get space. You usually sort of use your forearms or you weight in. You put your weight on him and then push back to create the space and go for the middle. But he just sort of goes, pam, but then got enough space to whip those really long arms right through the middle. It's quite amazing for a big fellow. He gets generates the space without there being any space. He's a magician.
Impressed with David Benavidez, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I've always kind of been a fan and was just waiting, hoping that he would. I mean, he won that world title when he was 20, but I was just kind of hoping that he would get his shit together because obviously we've had COVID during that spell as well. But I mean, he did for a little while there become a case study in kind of how to cock things up in a not too comical fashion, but you'd read it on a page and just think, what else could you do?
Unbeaten former 2-time champion.
Yeah, I know exactly. That in itself just doesn't make any sense at all, does it? But he's just got so many tools, hasn't he, in his locker, and he really needed to win on the weekend as well. And I think that does play a part when you've got a fight at that kind of level. Plant is very, very tough and good, very good as well, and he's achieved an awful lot. But when you've made a lot of money, we talked about it last week, just subconsciously, at that level, the difference can be that the other person just needs it a bit more than you. And he really, really needed it, Benavidez. There's no question about that. And it is impressive to see someone just not panic and then just put it on him in the way he did in the final rounds.
Yeah, I thought it was good, Benavidez. We mentioned it briefly beforehand, and he said that he didn't panic in the early rounds. I think we all expected maybe we didn't, a slightly faster start from Benavidez. We knew Plant would be at his most effective in those early rounds. The fight, I mean, I mentioned it when we were doing the preview. The fight I always think about when I think of Caleb Plant is the Caleb Truex fight, where for 4 rounds he was full of beans, and then after that he wasn't. And I feel like there was an element of that against a much better opponent who was able to capitalise this past weekend, where Plant was negative. Okay, he was winning the rounds, but he wasn't.
Oh, I don't know whether he was negative.
I always that's kind of how I view Plant in general. Maybe it's something, a preconceived notion I have of him, but
he's rattling off combinations though. So I was that negative. I think I understand what you said, but he's moving wrong, holding his feet, throwing the punches, and moving again. He's doing exactly what he should be doing. I don't think, and it looked good. I don't think it looked bad. I think the negative thing is tapping, holding, spinning, running, tapping.
I felt like he did quite a lot of holding. And
the holding was horrendous.
Even throughout the fight, and that's what I mean. It's kind of like he'll jab and then try and immediately tie. I'm not saying obviously he's not going to try and fight David Benavidez on the inside. It's not necessarily, it's a smart thing that he's done, but I just feel like when I'm watching him, I just can't ever see him boxing like that for 12 rounds and winning a fight at the top level. I just don't see him.
I was just going to say exactly that. It's a really hard thing to do because judges like a guy who comes forward.
And
at
also,
some point,
just physically,
he's been
168 pounds for his whole career. He's a big 168. And that Truax fight was an example of it. And I felt like in the Canelo fight as well, he kind of got ground down and struggled physically to just box that way and spoil. Because I do feel like he spoils quite a lot and he doesn't work enough to win those big fights against the guys who are going to put the pressure on.
I think he got two guys who are tremendous pressure fighters. Though.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the difference. In different styles, but you got like Canelo's just a horrible pressure fighter, and Benavidez is horrible in his own thing. He's just giant for the weight. So I think Plant still beats most other super middleweights, and I think he can box at that pace better. Not that pace. I think he can box for 12 rounds. I think he can box for 12 rounds or 8 rounds. Certainly, like he did in the first 4. Because the intensity of the pressure would be less against others.
Yeah, it's kind of like the level below. The Izcata fight was like that, where he started really well for sort of 7 or 8 rounds, and even that towards the end of the fight, he'd slowed down a little bit. But he, again, that's that kind of slightly lower down than
punches. Like Andrew Cain back earlier on. You start
knowing where you are. Yeah.
You got to what you do. You got to put your best foot forward. What you do, and sometimes it's to you're going to be tired at the end, but hoping you build up enough lead, and you got enough energy to get out of trouble or stay alive or be mobile, whatever it is. When you've got good feet, like Plant has, he thinks if I can start fast and make you chase the fight, and hopefully that's why I thought it was going to be a start fast from Plant. I thought those then like first 4 rounds or 3 rounds, and I thought maybe 4 to 6 or something. Benavidez would maybe panic a bit, really force the pace, and then I thought Plant would have a second wind around 8 or 9, and then the last few rounds Benavidez would just be too much for him and grind on a stoppage. That's what I thought, but it didn't turn out that way. I think there was a better start from Plant, but Benavidez just slowly, methodically, that's what it was, walked him down and just continued to do that. And then as the rounds got on, as soon as he felt he must have felt something on the punches of Plant.
Yeah, that's kind of how
just a little bit weaker, and then that's
how I felt, because I did feel like there was a period, I think it was like the 4th or 5th round, where Benavidez just started to look like he might start getting frustrated. And then after that, that's where I feel like the tempo dropped from Plant. He wasn't able to be as mobile. And then on the inside, when you mentioned it earlier on, where he was kind of grabbing a little bit more and spoiling a little bit more. And he was taking those. What I was really impressed with Benavidez, you mentioned kind of the uppercut. It's also that chopping right hand that was coming over the top. And that was having a lot of success. That was hurting Plant. But one of the things that you'd mentioned on the preview show, Andy, is kind of would Plant be willing to go to those places, and I feel like he showed that he was still willing, because 10, 11 and 12 were really, really tough for him.
Yeah, he did. I've got loads of time for that, and I do agree that, say those titles become fragmented again, which they probably will do before too long, then a certain level of world class opponent, but just not those two, he could still get wins against. I think the fire probably still burns there, and he will want to continue. It looks like that. He hasn't really got much left to prove, though. He's been a world champion. He's been in with some really good guys. He's made a lot of money, but he definitely showed that he's got minerals to spare, hasn't he? Because that got as hard as it gets, really.
And he was firing back in the 12th round as well. He was really...
He's still a street kid.
Yeah. He kind of made that... It was a beautiful quote that he said afterwards. I think he retweeted it when he said, you can't crack a poor boy's chin. Which I really liked.
That's a great line.
Nice little poetic
but as you sort of alluded to, money does crack a... because they forget where they come from, what given that push, desire, whatever, to get there. Once they get there, then they forget about where they come from. And they soften up, and why wouldn't you? But some fighters don't, and I don't think he has.
No, I don't think he has either. It's always that great Rocky line, isn't it? You got civilized rock, and that happens to some fighters, and others it doesn't. It doesn't matter how much money they've got; they never become civilized.
Was that the fight that we needed to see from David Benavidez? Was that? I mean,
we've kind of quality operator, haven't he? Who looks fresh and in his prime. I think so. Yeah, I think that's a good win for him. That's a real solid win. People are going, "Oh, he is the monster. He is the monster," and they see him in with Canelo. I think that's what they want. I think Canelo will still beat him. I think after watching that, I think Canelo would. still, if he can make the weight fine and he's healthy and all the rest of all that stuff, and he looks good against John Ryder, which he has to, but he's in more in the conversation now than he has been before, I would feel, because it might be a change of the pattern with age and desires and all those things that the different fighters have. But it was a good. That was his. Not his. Well, maybe it was his coming out party.
It sort of was, yeah. It sort of was, yeah. Because even in the fights where he won a title against Ronald Gavril, and then Anthony Durrell, and they're not. They're not that marquee.
And he looks solid. I mean, he looks big and all that, but he kind of
didn't have that puppy. He didn't have that puppy fat though. I think this time, not as much as we've seen it in the past. And the face looked a little bit leaner and meaner.
Yeah, he came in at 166, I think, didn't he? Yeah. So he's done the weight.
But his face doesn't change. I know, like when you hit him, he doesn't show anything. They're happy with the fight against they are. When you hit somebody and there's no expression on their face, or you rattle a combination off, you do something good, and just no expression in their face, you're like, did that have an effect? I don't know. Did I hurt him? Is he confused? Is he panicking? Does he know he's getting beat? It's just nothing. And they're horrible to fight against.
No, I'm a fan of that. So I always notice at international amateur tournaments, there are some nations where it's just Cubans are like it, and Russians.
You know who's like it?
It's just like
a boxer called Paul Samuels, who was a good pro actually. I boxed him as an amateur. He was a 6 foot featherweight, and he was knackered because I boxed such a high pace. But I have the 2 rounds. I go in the 3rd round. I'm tired, but I'm forcing the pace. I used to be better as an amateur. I was quite aggressive, but he's just and he was fucked more than I was, and it was just one. Look at his face like that.
Good poker face.
No, but you're in the corner going, I got to cement this round now, and you're like this.
He was in that.
You got to be feeling the pace.
He was in the double knockdown with Cello, wasn't he?
Yeah, the end of his career, that was. Yeah.
So these are actually, that's one of the people might think they haven't seen him, but they have.
We would have seen him without realising it.
Yeah. He's in a war with Wayne Alexander as well, wasn't he? Like middleweight.
He's in a few wars as well.
Yeah. Richard Williams and so.
How do you see Canelo Benavidez? Let's assume, all due respect, he comes past John Ryder. Looks the same as he did against Gennady Golovkin. How do you see Canelo Benavidez?
I think that's a really close fight. Sometimes when somebody loses, like Canelo did against Bivol, reports of their demise become greatly exaggerated, shall we say? And he's back at super middleweight now, which is where he is strongest. I'll be really interested to see what happens against Ryder. I don't think John will beat him, but he is a very solid, well-organised fighter, John. And we know, as we discussed previously, that the way John likes to go about it is the way that Canelo would like somebody to go about it. And that's what's going to make it hard for him. But let's just say that he manages to do a little bit of damage, do some damage, playing him at his own game. If we see a little bit of that, then I would fancy that Benavidez would be getting Canelo, not at, way past his best, but just at the right time.
Getting him at a good time. You mentioned it last time. Boxing's about timing, and those fights in particular about timing. I still think Canelo wins the fight. I think we did this before the fight, where it was like, okay, if he's like this and he's like this, that which is just high and ridiculous.
We tend to say it might be the right. There's been no better time for Benavidez than this time,
and it'll only get better for Benavidez because he's still improving, and Canelo inevitably is going to have more miles on the clock, and
improving is important. I think if Canelo, because Canelo showed certainly in the first Golovkin fight how adaptable he could be, and was moving well, and the guy who's always been pressurising other fighters could actually move on the back foot and still be aggressive and still be effective. And he might have to do a bit of both against Benavidez, but I think he has to try and hurt Benavidez. If he can hurt Benavidez, not knock him out, but hurt him and push him back, not with the punches rather than the pressure of his feet, then he does a number on. Doesn't beat Benavidez, he does a number on him. He might go all the way. I think Benavidez can take a great shot, I think. But if he can't intimidate Benavidez, I still think he wins on the back foot, actually. Those things on the back foot. I gotta say, the back foot, I said that. Every boxer fights, when you were going forward, it was on the back foot, because all the power comes off. You push off the back foot for your punches. So that back foot thing is something we say, but it's absolute bollocks.
Boxing on the outside.
Boxing on the outside, yeah. But it is true, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
But it's I think, but you can still move and be the dancer and still be effective. So, but it'd be hard against a guy who's a volume puncher.
It's about how two different styles negate the same style. You've got Caleb Plant, who's kind of lateral movement and moving on the outside, whereas Canelo has his own presence, and the threat of the counter will make Benavidez probably slightly wary of closing the distance.
But if you can absorb that counter, like Bivol could, and what Bivol showed is that if you sit on the ropes and Canelo and Rhodes, Canelo always takes a step back to get a rest before he goes again. And what Bivol did so clever, when he took that step back, he went right at him with straight long, because he knew he had the reach and the height and the physical size advantage, and he punched right at him and pushed him back with the punches, and that made Canelo not hurt, because he's got one of the best chins, not the best chin in boxing, him and Golovkin, but it made him tired, drained his energy. You can see, I'd never seen Canelo so tired in a fight ever. In that fight, I can't remember the last time I seen him so physically tired, including the 2 Golovkin fights. Let me add, and so that might be a way to win, but I just don't know if Benavidez has the smarts just yet.
That's kind of where I think he has what he needs from a physical point of view, and ideally even from a stylistic point of view, but it's just the season. I think he comes in a little bit in straight lines at times, and I feel like the threat of the Canelo counter might just stop him in his tracks. One of the things I did see floating around on Twitter from Samson Lukovitz, of course, is promoter of David Benavidez, is the potential for David Benavidez versus David Morrell. You like that one, Andy? I do anything for you?
Yeah, I do quite like that one. You look at other options, and people were thrown out Charlo.
Middleweight, and you just think like the size of Benavidez, and he's not boxing nearly 2 years, Jamal Charlo.
And people were thrown out Andrade, but I don't. Of those three, I'd probably be keenest on Morrell. I think of those three. I mean, he'll be after the Canelo sweepstakes, won't he? That'll be what he wants. And
everybody always
you'd have
is.
thought he'll get it, because who better, if he takes Joe Ryder, who better for Canelo than him? Because
Canelo wants to fight Bivol, apparently, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He doesn't want to fight a Mexican.
He wants to fight. So we interviewed Canelo November. This is just after his hand surgery, and we said to him there about who do you want to fight next. He said he wants to fight Dimitri Bivol. He beat him. He really wants the revenge. He wants this. He wants that. And we said about fighting Mexican fighters. He said no, I didn't say I would never fight a Mexican fighter. I just said like ideally we represent Mexico. But he's not scared of fighting anybody. He'll fight Benavidez if the fight makes sense. But it looks as though he wants to box Bivol. He wants to get revenge, and he'd said to us, and kind of misreported about the fight being at 168 and him dragging him down. He wants to fight him again at light heavyweight. He wants to go up to 175. But I think it's got to the stage of his career. He's what, 4-weight world champion, undisputed champion. It's got to be kind of, I don't know, legacy, that he's that pride. He wants to beat the man who's beat him. He doesn't really need any other accomplishments or accolades, does he?
Love it, and that's what makes him a great fighter. But it's just ill-advised.
Yeah.
I think, just that weight was never good for him. We obviously with hindsight, but the Kovalev fight, he was not very good in that until he got the finish. So you forget about how he's being outboxed. Just remember him knocking him out, and who Kovalev was at that time, and Bivol was clever and smart, and all that was a massive. If the main things were in beating Canelo, but size was a big factor also, because he could absorb the shots and he wasn't intimidated or by Canelo's presence, and that's a big part of Canelo's game. So even though Benavidez is massive and might be a light heavyweight, he's still boxing at super middle, where Canelo actually is still too small for that weight. Let's be honest, he's a midget, and he's like an inch taller than me or something. It's just unbelievable how good, how he's gone through the weights and how good he is. It's just like mind-boggling for his stature. So yeah, what does he? But then again, what does he need in the game? So he's only striving for greatness because he has more money than anyone, and he's done more than most could ever wish to do. Arguably, he's one of the greatest Mexicans who ever lived. Not the greatest, maybe, but arguably, maybe he is. Some people might say that, but he's one of the best. And saying that on its own is just amazing. Yeah. So, what's he got left to prove? He's proven things for himself.
I wonder if somebody, it'd have to be the Reynosos, I guess, could talk him into trying to propose a fight at 172 rather than 175. I know Bivol won the first one and all the rest of it, but let's be real, Canelo is still the guy who calls the tune. I just wonder if someone around him can just say to him, let's just, you're giving too much away by fighting at 175. You can still show that you've got big balls if we can just get him down a little bit. I mean,
when it's been discussed about the 168, and I'd assume, obviously not speaking for Canelo, I'd assume it'd be kind of similar about 172, where he said, he wants to fight him again at 175. He doesn't want to box him at 168, because then if he beats him, everyone will say, he's weight drained and he came down, and if he's made all the money in the world, he's got all the accomplishments that he could ever wish to have, why not just think, okay, well, that's the fight that I want. I'm certainly financially secure enough.
Yeah.
I've won all the belts I could have ever wished to win and more. This is the one I want. This is my Everest, or whatever you want to call it. And if he beats Bivol at 175 pounds, I mean, it's sort of difficult to think of things that could further enhance his legacy at this stage. But let's say he goes and beats Dimitri Bivol at 175 pounds.
It's amazing.
It's a massive win. And there's only a very, very small select number of things that Canelo could do to enhance his legacy or take his career any further. He probably looks at a Benavidez and thinks, I've boxed countless kids coming up over the years. What does he bring to the table? Oh, yeah, it's a really big fight, but, if I fight Bivol, it's going to be a big fight. Or he's going to get paid however much money to box him in Mexico, Vegas, Abu Dhabi, wherever. So
it is the only thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
pretty much. Or winning a box Badu Jack at cruiserweight.
Yeah, it is.
No, well, why not?
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy.
I would love to see him.
He's done so much.
I would love to see him do that. I would love to see him go to have the PBC fights and box, I don't know what's happening with Jamal Charlo, box Benavidez, Charlo, and I don't know, Morel or whoever else they have. They're well stocked at sort of 160, 168, thereabouts. But I don't know. I feel like the Bivol fight is a niche that he would very much like to scratch.
And it'll happen if that's what he wants. That it'll happen, because when you're as big as that, you decide, don't you? Your team doesn't decide. People around you might kind of like to think that they don't decide.
You might say Bivol, you're like 175. You can only put on £3.
Yeah. Well, the Kovalev fight, there was a rehydration clause with that, which was very hush in fight week when we were out in Vegas, because Kovalev wasn't able to talk about it. But so you never know.
Wait, was he drunk?
I don't know. I don't know, but I can take a pretty good guess. Right. Before we move on, we are struggling for time because there's so much to review. What do you reckon? Should we split this? Jordan, do you reckon we should split it? Okay, we're going to split it anyway. So final one from the review show: Jose Ramirez against Richard Commey this past weekend in Fresno, California. Andy Ramirez. First stoppage win since his stoppage win over Morris Hooker all of those years ago. That feels like forever.
I did that fight. I commentated on that fight.
Feels like a long time ago.
Unification, wasn't it?
Yeah. But got the job done against Richard Commey, who I think at 36, up above his natural weight, just felt the size and the natural 140-poundness of Jose Ramirez.
Yeah, I got quite into this because Sky took a couple of top-ranked build-up shows which featured Ramirez and Estrada, Seniesa Estrada, and they both got really good stories, and I love all of that stuff. We don't maybe see enough of it now. It had its heyday, didn't it? Probably 24/7 and all access and all that kind of thing. But it's great. I think it really, for me anyway, it just gets you so much more invested in things. And Ramirez has got, he's got a good story and he's a good fighter to watch. I think he was a little bit shocked by what happened to him against Josh Taylor. And I think that took some getting over. Not just because you could become undisputed champion and that opportunity is gone, probably never to come again, but just because I know on the cards it was close, but it wasn't actually.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't actually. If Josh had needed to win the final 2 rounds, I'm sure he could have, but he just needed to not get knocked out. And that's why I guess it ended up being tighter than it actually was. But yeah, he's a good guy, Ramirez, and I say he's good to watch, and he is a good fighter, and he's the kind of person you just love to have in the sport. And it was a good match for him because, as you say, Commey, who was all of those things as well. I was really pleased when he won his world title because he'd had a couple of rough decisions before that. But he's not a super lightweight. He never has been. He's definitely not now at 36. He's always kept himself in shape. Job well done by Ramirez, basically.
Barry?
I thought Commey was brilliant. Actually, he got well beat, but I thought he was brilliant. Like, again, out of his weight class, really, up against a guy who stylistically was always wrong for him. So how busy Ramirez was from the first round. But he dug in.
proper warrior.
Didn't
Isn't
he?
he?
Really
That's
dug
him all
in.
over.
Commits that right hand. Caught Ramirez a few times, to be fair, but then really had a good go. And in the end, he got caught with a body shot, didn't he, on the ropes? And he sort of like
He'd been down.
He'd been hurt already,
yeah.
I think. And then that body shot whipped. You almost didn't see it. I've rewound about 3 times, and on that Fight TV, you can't quite get it right. I'm going like, and
It's on Sky.
on Sky, yeah. No, but I got like a stupid thing on my Virgin. It's like I couldn't quite get it right on it.
Yeah.
And but it just whips across the body, so you almost don't see it. So I had to watch it about 4 or 5 times, and then he takes a little step back and sort of goes, "Oh no."
Yeah.
And then stayed on the floor.
They're really weird, those punches,
on the
aren't they?
floor.
Because like you say, they look like they haven't landed almost, or if it's just like
they're the worst
skin.
ones, because they just
Everyone
just
says that.
like and
Everyone
the air
says
just
that.
exhumes from your body. It's horrible.
There was a knockout on the undercard. It was quite similar to that Muratala knockout with the left hook to the body. It was a similar sort of shot where it landed and it was sort of like, oh, actually, no, I'm done here.
That delayed reaction,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's
Ramirez's variety in his work, when he lets his punches go. I mean, like, I can't remember the one.
Where does he lose his power, Ramirez? Because I feel like he does. When he's letting his shots go, he does it with such ferocity.
Well, he don't load up. See, I don't think he loads up. I think he lets his punches go, but I think it's clever, actually. I think he reduces power there because he tries to do too many angles, so he can't commit to going like this. But he whips up to whip across. You know what I mean? He wants to lift your head up and spin it off his axis. That's really clever, because you don't know where you're at. You're in a proper panic, so you can see. So maybe that power was never really massively. It's just the fact that at a lower level, that happens to you, and you go, oh, bloody hell, I don't know where I am. Like, you look for the floor. It's horrible, because he sort of goes up, across, this way, that way, down.
It's just shots from everywhere, like all different angles.
But if he loads up, he can't do that, because he's got too tense. So his fluency in his work is not Lomachenko, but he goes bam, 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 and it's all, and like they're swooshing around, but he keeps smooth and fluent with that, so it reduces power. But again, he hits you from, you don't see the shots. He lifting the head up so he can hit it off the axis as well. So it's really good work, and to cope with that, and what he does really well is he gets to you. I was thinking, I can't remember the fighter I wanted to tell him to watch this. But anyway, he gets to you, and then he takes a step around the side. You can see, and he doesn't even, and he does it slowly, like he thinks about it. He goes, gets you on the ropes, bam, 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 and he goes in, he takes a step over to this side, so he can do that. So he can start off, and then he comes back around the body then. So again, you can't, when he gets you on the ropes, you can't fire back, because he's not there. He's there. So he's a really clever fighter. And you just brilliant.
I always think that little step off to the side is something that not many people do, but it's just so effective, isn't it? Because, like you say, it takes you out off the punching line, but also it gives you a better angle. Step off to the side, straight left hand into the body. Ricky Hatton used to do that.
But you have to be aware of what, like, Ricky would do really fast, but I mean, you have to be aware of, you have to have a calm persona, because you have to think what you're doing. So most people, when they land with a punch or hurt somebody, then their focus is just get on him and
keep doing
you almost do things like muscle memory. Just go for it and without thinking. That's why sometimes they smell their work and they get too close to the target. But like, he doesn't load up. So when he doesn't load up or doesn't get too overexcited about what he's doing, then he got time to go, bam, bam, yes, think to move, and I go again. Sometimes that can be, the guy can escape if you do, but I think with age and experience, because you got more time than what you think. When you're young, you don't think when you got fast hands, you throw punches too fast. When you got fast feet, you move too fast, and sometimes people don't. I say it all the time. I used to throw feints in my feet. I do it as 19. I do it so fast, it didn't work. No one saw it. No, it's just a waste of time. Whoa, no one saw it. He didn't work. He wasn't intimidated. He didn't see anything, you know. And you get those people who got power. They try and throw so hard, and they tense up, and actually it works against them. They tense up.
That's exactly right. Yeah, with speed particularly, because you just need to recognise that you are naturally quicker than the other person.
Yeah.
You don't need to be 10 times faster. Just twice as fast is fine.
Because sometimes if you've got fast hands, you can get loads of power. Like speed and speed kills and all that stuff. So, good speed. But if sometimes you got too faster hands, like I was a biggest victim of this. I'd want to go brrr, but then because you're trying to go fast, then they're all pit pat, where they're not going to be knockout punches, but they would be bam 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 instead, and then you would feel it, and it's still too fast for him to work against. But Ramirez gets that balance right, and that's why he can move on the target. He doesn't rush his work, and he's smooth with all his punches. So it was a great performance from him, and he had the guy who showed loads of resistance, fired back, so he had to make that angle to stay safe. But Ramirez still showed he's a real
Interested to see what they do with him, because obviously you've got Taylor, Lopez that we're still waiting for the announcement.
Josh was with you. Have you got a Josh Taylor update?
They haven't.
He looked pretty lean, I thought.
Yeah,
he was about 10 weeks out.
He was in good nick before he got the injury.
Yeah, and he looks focused, and let's not forget what he's done.
He's brilliant.
Even just focus on that catch fight, and rightly so. Like, Catchall was hard done by, but
God, he was good against Ramirez.
But this Lopez fight's a better fight. I mean, we all want to see the Catchall fight, because that's what justice should demand. But him and Taylor and Teofimo Lopez, the build up to the fight would be horribly great, I should say. Be really nasty, and with all the people involved. And I love Joe McNally with Lopez's dad. That's going to be absolutely fantastic.
Josh Taylor's dad with Lopez's dad. Have you ever met Josh Taylor's dad?
No, I haven't. No, is he?
He's exactly what you'd expect him to be. But anyway, carry on.
but no, but I mean, Joe McNally won't take any shit off. That's where they're going to be on the top table. But I mean, really, so he said the fight's there, but they haven't been officially signed, so it's not there. So there's not doing Usyk and Fury. You can get all carried away. But I'm literally planning on getting over to... So I'm going on holiday.
June the 10th.
I'm going on holiday on the 11th of June. I told my missus, you might have to fly over on your own, and I'll fly from America and meet you there.
I'm sure that's going to go down well.
I'm the master in my own house.
But no, it's good to see him.
Let me just check if I'm allowed to say that.
I was going to say, are you allowed to stay for a little bit longer?
Yeah. When he walked in, it was good to see him, because I love Josh Taylor. Like that win against Ramirez and the whole build up to get to Undisputed. You just really hope it doesn't get kind of lost, because it was during COVID, and then everybody went crazy about Catterall, and then we haven't seen him since. He needs to get back on track and put together some big wins, because he's more than capable of it. Get back boxing in the UK and just. I know that he's a little bit, he's never going to be
a darling
sponsored by Habitat, for example, but he's a brilliant fighter, and he needs to be celebrated.
He's a nasty fighter, isn't he, as well?
Yeah, and he kind of got that. He's got that back a bit, and it's almost like the Lopez fight is kind of. Okay, I think still the Catterall fight winning the Catterall rematch would have still probably gone furthest to, I don't know, it's a silly thing to say, sort of repairing his reputation, but something like that. But if it's not that, then Lopez, a fighter who's also got profiles, also a good fighter, but also they're going to have that kind of that build up and that angst between them.
Two undisputed champions there, you know what I mean, in different weights.
Yeah, what a fight.
But what Taylor's done, like I won a world title in like 18 fights, and back then, like that was pretty fast going. That was. He unified the whole division in less, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think it was 14 fights.
Unified it all. It's just crazy, isn't it? And
what,
by
what
the way,
what did he say
never
about
had one easy fight.
No, not at all.
I said this on Saturday. I said in an era of literally like world titles being chucked on left, right, and centre at times, and that was my era as well. I'm not just picking on the modern era. He did it.
It was 18th fight.
18, yeah.
He did it as hard as anyone's done it.
Yeah.
In any era.
Yeah. I remember I got to go to his fight against Dave Ryan, Commonwealth title. 5
fights.
Yeah, fifth, sixth fight. Before that, they'd managed to fool a few people into boxing him, and they really did have to do that, because otherwise, he'd knock people down, and then the opponent would look towards the corner as if, to their manager, as if to say, thanks for this. You never told me about this. And then, Postol, I remember being at that fight.
Baranchik fight was a great fight, but the O'Hara Davis fight.
Yeah,
of course, it's kind of, he's knocking on the door for a world title now. You can see them in a unification rematch at some point.
Even at the time, it was always a hard fight. A lot of people fancied O'Hara because of his power, didn't they? And so it was, and also it's because he's an awkward fighter to come up against. But then we saw how effectively and how we saw in that fight how Taylor becomes a great fighter, because he wants to be in the middle of all the panic, all the danger. He wants to be right there. That's where he fights better in the danger zone. In the danger zone, sounds like a Top Gun film. But he fights better. Like when you see that in the Catterall fight, when he's trying to box better, box smarter.
Sort of standing off him, and it was upright up front on the left hand.
Yeah,
Ramirez. Kind of boxing how you were talking about with Okolie, where it's sort of turning from here, Taylor.
Ramirez would have felt, wouldn't he? If we can drag it onto the inside, then I'm going to beat him there. Then he got him on the inside and practically chinned him with that uppercut, and you just think, oh God, like this. What did he say about Okolie? Did he?
I said, he lived there. He was honest. He said like just said what everyone says. He gets we're criticising. He said we're criticising the guy who's winning, who hasn't been close to getting beaten by anybody. That's the truth of it, more or less. But still, it's underwhelming. That's it. No, we all felt the same, didn't we? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And I think he's at world level now, Okolie. That's the criticism he's going to face, and so forth. No, because he has chilling power. So you're like, well, it's just madness. Like, if he didn't have those things, Okolie, then you wouldn't criticise him.
No,
and I think that's what Josh was trying to say. Josh was very good in the radio.
We feel like, because we feel like there's more to come. That's just the frustration. But
I just think like with Ramirez, there's got to be something cooking for him around that 135, 140 divisions that Top Rank have. And he turned down the shot against Regis Prograis. He was next in line to box Regis Prograis. I'm not sure what the reasons were. The thing is for that is because again, sort of the boring business of boxing where you've got Ramirez who sells in Fresno in California against Prograis who doesn't sell anywhere really. He's not going to take that on a split that's going to be favourable to Prograis when he brings in all the money. So it's one of those beautiful fights that we probably are not going to see, which is a real shame. But also, it's a real shame that I feel like we've run out of time for today. For our review segment, we're going to try and twist Barry Jones's arm and get him to stay for a little bit of Anthony Joshua stuff next. Not looking good though, but anyway, thanks as always.
Good, Brav.
It's not looking good, Brav. There he goes again. But as always, thanks very much to Barry Jones and Andy Clark, and to you who have sat here and listened to us ramble on for the last hour and a half or so. Thanks very much for stopping by, and we look forward to catching up with you next time.